Okay, pardon me. And now we turn to cases. Having looked at statutes as the other major primary source of law, we now turn to cases. And as you know, cases are court opinions issued by courts. It's an opinion in which the court, the judges on the court are explaining that decision. Most cases that we read are either from a Supreme Court or from a court of appeal. So we call those generically appellate court cases because both of them are pretty much doing the same thing, which is they're hearing the appeal and issuing a written decision. So the U.S. Supreme Court, the California State Supreme Court, and the next level down, the courts of appeal for both the federal and state systems. That's where most of our cases come from. We do get some federal trial court cases from the federal district courts that are used and read, but the ones with the most precedent tend to be the appellate court cases. So look at these odd numbers. The U.S. Supreme Court has 9 judges. The California Supreme Court has 7 of them. Courts of appeal, generally when your case is appealed from the trial court to the court of appeal, you generally get your case is assigned to a panel of 3 judges. So we have 3, 7, and 9 there. Those are some odd numbers. They're odd numbers because judges can disagree. And if you get an even number, let's say there are 6 judges on a court, 3 to 3, they might split evenly, and 3 of them say this is the right decision, and the other 3 say no, it should be handled that way. Well, that would be an even split, and no one would win. So the odd number assures that one side will, at least there will be a majority of that number, and a majority may be on the U.S. Supreme Court. It may be 5 to 4 or 6 to 3 in a very narrowly decided case. A lot of appellate court cases are 2 to 1, where there are 2 judges in the majority and one who doesn't agree with the decision for various reasons. Those various reasons, the dissenting judges will often write an opinion of their own called a dissent. And the dissents do not represent the law. They do not have the value of law the way that the majority's opinion does. The majority's opinion is the law. It is an expression of the law. And so even if it's a narrowly decided case, like a 5 to 4 Supreme Court ruling, whichever decision got the 5, that's the law. And so the dissenting opinions from the minority of judges, they don't represent the law. Sometimes they're interesting, and over time the law can change and sometimes adopt some opinions that were minority opinions before, and society changes. But for now, focus on majority opinions as the law. Dissents are not the law. They don't have legal value. Also, you should know there's a dirty secret in the legal field that not all cases are published. That's certainly true at the trial court level. Very few of them are published at all. But even in the courts we're talking about, the appellate courts, not all of the cases are published. And there's a rule stating that we need to use only published cases when we are citing to something, when we're using a case as support, as authority to support an argument that we're making, for instance. We need to use cases that are published because those have some value as far as precedent, or as far as convincing a judge that it's the right way to go. But unpublished cases we are not supposed to use. Why is this even an issue? Because if you look at the books, the print reporters, there are no unpublished cases. That's by definition, those are the ones that are published. the courts as a whole have these committees of people who decide which cases will be published and which won't. If a case is unpublished, it doesn't mean that the case was changed. It was still decided the way it was decided as between the parties in that case, but it cannot be used as precedent and or for its legal value. Maybe because it was an outlier, it just didn't. Somebody thought it wasn't a good representation of the law for whatever reason. The reason this comes up is because even though you don't see these cases, you don't see unpublished cases in the books, you will see them online. If you go into Lexis or Westlaw, you will encounter them from time to time, unpublished cases. Beware, you can read them. Sometimes they're interesting. Sometimes you find one that's, oh, so good, so perfectly on point for what you need, and you're not supposed to use it because it's unpublished, and yet it still makes its way into those databases. So just beware, keep an eye out for them. If you see them, do not cite to them. Only published cases are supposed to be used. Cases are published in reporters, and a reporter is a set of books. It's a set of volumes of books that prints the cases in order, meaning that the more recent cases are published in the more recent books. And if you want to see the older cases, you look to the left side of the stack and you see some older books over there. So they're published chronologically in order of when the case came out. And the databases work the same way, because each database basically represents a set of volumes, and so there are databases within Westlaw and Lexis and other databases which cover cases, or cases from a particular state, or cases from a particular court or set of courts. And those are called reporters. Also, we use those reporters, the designation, when we are citing to the case. When we're delivering a citation of the case, that is, we are referencing that source and where we found it, providing information in a standard format so that others can find it, and they do the same for you. So it's like the language we use with these citations. U.S. Supreme Court decisions are published in two main reporters: an official publication called the United States Reports, that's U.S. with dots, periods. And there's also a privately published Supreme Court reporter, which is S. CT. That one, I believe, is published by Thomson Reuters West. Anyway, you will see citations to both, and sometimes one case will have both citations listed. So that would mean you could look up that case in either one of these reporters. You don't need to use them both. You could just look it up in either one of them and find it. So when you're citing to a case, we are not covering citations yet, just sort of getting your feet wet here. When you cite to a case, you can choose either of those to use as a citation, and if you want to do a parallel cite, you can include both of them. That's what it's called when you when you list citations for the same thing in multiple sources. It's called a parallel citation. The United States Court of Appeals cases are published in the Federal Reporter, which is FDOT. No jokes, please. And trial court cases from the United States District Courts, that's the level of trial courts in the federal system, are published in the Federal Supplement, which is FSUP. So when you see citations to cases in either of those, you'll know that FDOT means Court of Appeals cases for the federal system. And those will normally include in the parentheses with the year, it'll normally mention which court it's coming from, like Ninth Circuit, 2012 or something. So it'll tell you which court and year, just because you don't know from looking at the citation otherwise which exact appellate court that's coming from. You know it's somewhere in the federal system though. And for FSUP, Also, normally with those ones, the citation will list in the parentheses with the year, it'll list which U.S. District Court is doing that, like U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. There'll be some abbreviation saying it's coming from the Northern District of California. And then the year will include within the parentheses. You'll see all this when we get to citations. We're not there yet. So here's an example of what a citation would look like. I'm not making you learn this yet, but you can sort of start to see how it is and what the pieces are. Smith versus Jones, 25 U.S. 765. And then you can see the parentheses for 2003. I don't think this is a real case. It's just a format example. So 25 U.S. means United States reports 765. So they don't even need to tell us inside the parentheses with the year there. They don't even need to tell us that this is a U.S. Supreme Court case, because we already know that's the only thing that's printed in this set of reporters. That format, the 25 is the volume, and the 765 is the page number. So the volume, you would just, if you were looking this up physically in the library in a stack of books, you would find the shelf that has the United States reports on it, and then you would walk down, skipping from 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 25. When you see a book that has a big number 25 on the spine, you'd open it up and you'd flip to page 765. This is kind of like the codes for statutes, where when you flip and open the pages, you see the section number on the top. Now you're going to see the page number on the top. It's going to be very bold, very easy to see. So 765, you're going to see that. You just flip forward, 762, 763, 764, 765. Aha, hey, look at that. There's my case. That's the page where it begins. Yeah, it may not end there. It may take a few pages further, but that's where it begins. And so that's what we use as the citation. We'll look at the volumes and later, very soon, and then later we'll look inside them. Not in this unit, but shortly. Okay, case reporters and basic citation format. So the California Supreme Court and Court of Appeals cases are the ones we use at the state levels. We just looked at the federal cases, now we're looking at the state ones. Trial court cases are rarely published or cited, especially not at the state level. We just don't see those. Very, very rare. So we're generally using California Supreme Court and California Court of Appeal cases. Cases from the California Supreme Court are published in the Official Reporter, which is the California Reports. CalDOT is the abbreviation. And also in the unofficial, privately published set called California Reporter, which is CalDOT space RPTR dot. That's the one that West gives us. And that California Reporter prints some Court of Appeals cases as well. So you can find either the State Supreme Court or Court of Appeal cases. They're all in that Cal Reporter, that privately published set, which makes it a really simple set to get and use. And so a lot of libraries, including ours, has that. There also is a regional reporter which prints cases from California and other western states. It's called the Pacific Reporter. PDOT is the abbreviation. The Pacific Reporter and all the regional reporters, there are different ones all around the country representing, cover a region of states. There's an Atlantic Reporter, there's a Northwestern, there's all these different directional signs and designations. And so the Pacific Reporter covers most of the western states. What is this? Again, it's a regional reporter, so it's one that reports all the cases from the state Supreme Courts and Court of Appeals that have been decided in those states in that region. And so, yes, California cases are in there too, amongst other things. So if you want to look up a California case, you can find it in there. Very few places have a regional reporter anymore. Very few libraries. There may be some. You will sometimes see California cases parallel cited with one of the other, the CalDOT or the Cal Reporter, and then you also see a Pacific Reporter citation there, sort of parallel cited, so that if somebody wanted to look it up in there, they could. Used to be important because a lot of the federal courts just had that in their libraries; they didn't have the other ones, but at least federal courts of appeal. But now, being that we use libraries a lot less, and we're just typing in some citation online anyway, it's not widely used. But the time you will see it used in our library is for the older cases, because originally there wasn't a Cal Reporter, and so the older cases that predate the Cal Reporter system are over on the left side of the stack, and they have PDOT on the spine because they're only referenced with the Pacific Reporter citation. So those are just all different sets which have the same cases in them. It doesn't really matter which one you use or type in to find it. California Court of Appeal cases appear in CalApp, that's the California Appellate Reports, and also in the unofficial California Reporter, the Cal RPTR, which we talked about. That's a private set that's got both the State Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal cases. So pretty much all you want from California case law is in that set, and that's why a lot of people use it. Also, if you're in the Westlaw database, since that's the same company that owns it, that publishes these unofficial sets, they'll use that citation system a lot with the Cal Reporter. Okay, an example citation for a case in California might be Jones versus Kelly, 208 Cal.251 in the year 1929. So there you can see the case name and the year in parentheses, like we saw in the previous example. And we have two other numbers there, bracketing the volume abbreviation. So 208 Cal.251. 208 is the volume, and you find that on the shelf just by walking along and going along the numbers. 206, 207, aha, 208. Pull out that book with that on the spine, and then flip it open to page 251, which should be where your case begins. Year of publication is listed in parentheses. And also listed in parentheses sometimes will be more information on if it's a Court of Appeals case, which Court of Appeal, or if it's a, well, for the state, we don't have to worry about trial courts. It's just, you don't see those publishing cases. Okay, this is what the reporters for the state look like from the outside. This is the California Reporter set. This is more, this left picture is more how you would see it in a library like ours. We have this set. The set that we have is not up to date. It's just sort of there as, it's there as a relic, and it's there for you to practice with as far as fluency. But if you're checking for up-to-date law, it isn't up to date. You got to go online and verify the law. So it's something we can use to learn and to see how it works. And we can certainly do assignments up there, but as far as if you really want to research the law and get the up-to-date answer on something, you want to do it online, because we stopped the subscription on these. It's just too darn expensive, and one law firm after another has called us and tried to get rid of more of their sets, and nobody uses them anymore. They're just using the online databases. Nevertheless, if you learn how to use these, you'll be very fluent with the online databases. Very efficient. Okay, so cases are printed in the order that they are decided. So older cases on the left, and then the newer cases would be further to the right. They're going to be on the shelf in order. So you'll see the volumes ticking along the numbers here, volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, and yeah, it'll go on and on and on, and you get hundreds of them. However, when the volume numbers get too high, they start again. They reset them. So you can see here's an example of one from this first set, which is volume 120. You know, maybe when they get up to 300 or 900, I don't even know what it is, they just say, okay, enough's enough. We're going to start again with a new series. We'll call it second series, and we'll start with volume 1. So over further here on the right, you would see some newer looking volumes with this second series label on it. And right where it starts, you would see volume 1. And they start the volume numbers again. So what that means is if you see and there's the third series too. So some of the volumes are on a third series. There's one or two of them that might be on a fourth series by now. So why that's important is if you're looking up a citation and this will be in the citation. If it's a 2D case or a third series case, it'll be in the citation. And so if you see that in the citation, obviously if you see one that says 2D in it, it needs to be, you need to look up your volume number in this set, not the first series or the third series. That's why it matters. And then sometimes you'll see next to a book on the shelf, you'll see these softbound paperback updates, and that is basically if there's something that's been printed since they did the last bound volume. If there's some more recent cases, they'll send out the updates to libraries with these softcover updates. And so you can look in here for cases as well, but it's not going to be too much. Okay. I think that's about it for this unit.